and explore the theoretical and methodological challenges facing researchers in regional science, we have decided to organize virtual, at the moment, public debates on the most important and highly debated themes of regional sciences. This first webinar focuses on the consequences of Industry 4.0 for firms and mainly territories. This topic has been thoroughly investigated in a special issue recently published by Scienze Regionali. In closing my speech, I hope the webinar will be profitable and the next hour will be enjoyable and fruitful for every one of you. So thank you very much for being here with us. Roberto, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Laura. And before saying hello, everyone, let me advise you that we would like to record the webinar. So we can ask you whether, well, if you do not want to be, let's say, recorded, please stop your video or your camera working so we can go on. So I kindly ask our Il Mulino organizer to start recording the event, and the link will be published probably on the website of either the association or the journal. So thanks a lot for that. Thanks, Laura, again. And hello, everyone, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon, or good morning, or good evening, depending on where you are. I'm Roberto Antonietti. I'm one of the members of the editorial board of the journal, Scienze Regionali. So thanks, Laura, who is our editor-in-chief. But also thanks to all our colleagues of the editorial board. Thanks to the Italian Association of Regional Science again, for this opportunity, and also thanks to our editor, actually, Il Mulino, for hosting us in this circumstance. Today is the first, as Laura pointed, as the first, well, hopefully the first among many of webinars dedicated to a series of special issues in particular that the journal is promoting. Let me also say that the special issue has been just published, the one on the territorial effects of Industry 4.0 for firms and territories. It's published online on the website of the journal, but also on paperback version. So it's available. So if you are curious to read, let's say, more in detail, you can download the articles from there. I'm here for chairing this webinar. The program of the webinar will be the following. We have more or less 1 hour, 1 hour and 10 minutes. So after let's say, the greetings of Laura, we will actually leave the floor to our editorial guests of the special issue, who are 3 colleagues of mine at the Marco Fano Department of Economics and Management, University of Padua. We have Eleonora Di Maria, who is the speaker, actually, but also we have Marco Bettiol and Mauro Capestro, who are here with us. Then I would like to leave the floor to Roberta Capello, who is not only one of the contributors to the special issue, but incidentally, she's also the president of the Italian Association of Regional Science, also for, I suppose, providing some cheers from the association in general, but also for a specific speech about the topic of Industry 4.0 in regions. And then we will move to Sandro Montresor from GSSI, so Gran Sasso Science Institute in L'Aquila, for a second speech. Sandro also is a contributor to the special issue. And then we would like to open the discussion, so the Q&A session with the floor, following very simple rules. So while I kindly ask you to leave your microphone off during these presentations, I kindly invite you to unmute yourself and intervene. Maybe there is the possibility also to raise the hand, so I will try to manage the traffic and give you the floor every time, but you are free to pose your questions or comments in the last part of the webinar, and our guests will be, I think, more than happy to answer to you. Okay, so that's it. Let me leave the floor to Eleonora as, let's say, the representative of the editorial team of the special issue. Eleonora, please.
Good afternoon to everyone. Thank you, Roberto. I'm very, very pleased to be here and to start this new initiative by Scienze Regionali, the Italian Journal of Regional Science. Also on behalf of my co-editor, Marco Bettiol and Mauro Capestro, we really thank you and thank all the editorial board for the opportunity to give us the possibility to put together this very interesting, we hope, a special issue, also a webinar. And I would like also to thank all the contributors that provide their pieces of work to further develop the topic that we are discussing today. So I would like to share my screen. I hope technology will help. So I know that there are some issue. So I hope you can see my screen.
Yes, we can, Eleonora.
Okay, thank you. I'm not seeing no one anymore, so I will ask also to ask to Roberto to help me with the time.
Yeah, we are here. We are here. We don't
Okay,
abandon
thank you. Because I'm used to talk on Zoom. So this is the special issue on the effect of Industry 4.0 for firms and territories. This is a special issue. My speech today would try to provide you with an overview of what are the main topics that are discussing in this special issue and to provide you with some insights of the results. But of course, I would like to invite you all to read all the articles in the special issue. And I know that some of the topics that I'm introducing will be afterward developed by Roberta Capello and Sandro Montresor. So I would just to give you some additional food for thought and hopefully to have also an interesting discussion. I try to play with the abstract, I would say, try to put together the different perspective and keywords that are discussed in this special issue, 5 different articles that are talking in dealing with the topic of the special issue with many different perspectives. I must say that, of course, technology and Industry 4.0 is, let's say, at the heart of this special issue, but there are different other perspectives that are put together in the idea of try to understand more precisely which are the implications, economic, but not only economic implications for of this new technological revolution on industries, of course, on region, clusters. There is discussion about large and small, core versus periphery. This interesting analysis of data. We have qualitative analysis, quantitative analysis, different approaches and methodologies that are adopted in the special issue. So we think that we can provide a very rich contribution on this topic. You know that Industry 4.0 analysis has been developed for quite a while, in the sense that starting from the attention that the policies on Industry 4.0 had in Germany a few years ago, there's been a growing debate on different levels about what could be the possibility, the potentialities of Industry 4.0. On the one hand, taking into account more with a clear focus on the technology per se. So I put the box Industry 4.0, taking into account the idea that we have a large variety of technologies, from automation, robotics to artificial intelligence, 3D printing, cloud, just to name some of them. So to have a technological analysis of this transformation, but also there is a broad perspective which include the technology into a broad change that involve, of course, the way through which value is produced, how the different actors in the value chain are interconnected, which is the role of different players, suppliers, buyer, the role of actors also at the policy level. So the core of Industry 4.0 have to be put in a much broader context, they take into account what we know as the fourth industrial revolution that, of course, followed the other three one, in which the technology enter into the economic processes, and in which, since we are, in the Scienze Regionali context, has to take into account, having in mind also geography. So the debate in which this special issue wants to contribute have very different streams of research. Of course, I have no time to consider and discuss in details all of them, but one is, of course, related with the role of regions within, the different economic trajectories, the role of how the different industrial bases and specialization that characterize region may be transformed, may be impacted by the fact that there are new technologies that have a lot of potentialities in terms of data exchange, in terms of possibility to interconnect the different actors in the value chain, and so on and so forth. So the one key issue is related to the different role and the different important that region with their own characteristic may have in such a revolution. The geography and the geographical perspective is of course also considered, taking into account the impact on clusters and agglomeration phenomena that could be modified, could be shaped by the fact there are, again, technologies with different implications also in terms of recent data management, impact on the role of proximity in the activities related with the market and products exchange, innovation dynamics. The other attention and debate is related to how those kind of technologies could modify the competitiveness of firms, and also on places, which is of course connected with the previous point. So the idea is that there is a new revolution that transforms the opportunity to create new value, to also achieve and control value, to modify, for instance, the position of firms within value chain, how different places may become more or less relevant in, for instance, the organization of global value chain. But, and this is something that we will see also later in this webinar, we have to consider, together with this revolution, which is connected with technology, also the potential positive implication in terms of social inclusion, the implication related with environmental impacts, which is, I have to say from now, not one of the topic immediately considered in the special issue. And then we have a very important chapter, I would say, related with the implication that those kind of technologies has on skills, on the competencies of the workforce, and more in general, which could be the jobs that will be more affected by the new technologies, automation and artificial intelligence, just to mention two of them, and how those transformation in how the work could be organized could have on the competitiveness, again, on firms, on region. What are the opportunities related with those transformation in terms of new jobs that could be created, which are the losses, on the other hand, that should be taken into account. There is an attention on those kind of technologies at the firm, at the regional level, but there is also we have to take into account that we have also global scale, how the different regions, different actors within the value chain are interconnected, because one of the key characteristics of the Industry 4.0 is not only related to the strong impact on data collection and elaboration and exchange, but also the fact that there are different opportunities to organize also internationally economic activities, and so which are the effect in terms of attractiveness of region from very different point of view. And then, of course, Industry 4.0, sorry, I don't speak German, has been based on some policies. Specifically, we are also in Italy, we are experiencing different waves of policies related with Industry 4.0. So of course, it's really important to consider and what are the implications on the role of institution and policies, which kind of which is the level of institutional implication that have to be considered. So in this very broad debate, which is very large, we started to develop this special issue, and the special issue is as specific some key questions that are addressed and some contributions that are provided specifically through these through the 5 chapters that 5 papers that are included in the special issue. So one important point is related to the fact that digital transformation and digital transition has to be taken into account the context-specific issues. So from very different perspectives, the 5 contributions, the 5 papers try to explore the relationship between Industry 4.0 and the regional and the industrial impact, the way to explore more broadly how the context, the different institutional, social, technological, economic aspect of the different context may be affected by those technologies, but also how the context in a way may modify the way through which the technology may really have an impact on the trajectories of the regions, of the firms, of the value chain that are and the clusters that are considered. The way also in the debate, the 4th industrial revolution is being presented and discussed, may have some suggestion about the fact that there is, not in one best way, but a clear trajectories where more technologies are better than less, and if there is an attention on putting together, adopting all the technologies that could provide a very important impact in terms of the evolution of regions and firms, and that, for instance, if there is an application of those kind of technologies, all the processes would become smart, and we will have some positive economic impact in terms of, for instance, jobs or growth. What we obtain also in the different research that has been presented in the special issue, that instead we have to be very carefully in adopting this broad and one-way view of the 4th industrial revolution, and what instead should be taken into account is the idea that different contexts may have different peculiarities that should be taken absolutely into account, and they could show the richness also of the opportunities that could be connected with the adoption of those technologies. There is another important set of contribution that lies in the research question provided in the 5 papers that are related, of course, to the special consequences of the Industry 4.0. So there are a strong attention on how different regions could be affected by technologies. I know that Roberta Capello will speak after me, so I don't want to go too much in details on this. I want to say that there is an attention on the fact that, of course, there are some there could be seen some advantages for incumbents for the core regions, the core areas that could be stronger in terms of patent, in terms of innovation, and so the the process of adoption should modify or should maintain this distance compared to regions and areas that are lagging behind. What we observe in the research is instead that there could be also some interesting opportunities in terms of recent application on those regions, that the peripheries may have some interesting way to interpret, to adopt, to consider the potentialities of these technologies, and a lot of variety could emerge from this point of view. There are another areas of analysis which is contained in the 3 out of 5 contribution of these special issues that are referring to clusters. We know very well which is the attention, which is the role of clusters and industrial districts also in the competitiveness of Italy in general and some regions specifically in our country. And in fact, also from an empirical point of view, Italy is the empirical setting in which those papers develop their research. And the idea is that on the one hand, in general, there is a positive view, a positive results, a positive effect for clusters in adopting Industry 4.0 technology, even though there are different, there is an heterogeneous outcomes, not even if there is a positive kind of perspective in also the future trajectory of clusters, connected with the fact that firms and specialization of clusters may adopt technologies. On the other hand, there is also some question marks that still remain on the fact that we know clusters are heterogeneous, and so also this kind of adoption may maintain this difference.
Also, 4 or 5 minutes.
Thank you. The other areas of discussion is related with the relation between industrial specialization and location of manufacturing firms. So one of the questions, or better, different questions exploring the special issue are related to investigate to what extent also the variety of industry may lead to different adoption path. So from this, from the analysis, from the empirical analysis, what we can say is that there is not, again, one way, one size fits all, I would say, solution, but that there is an attention on matching between, for instance, product, process specialization, and the technological characteristics of the Industry 4.0, because we are considering Industry 4.0 as an umbrella of technologies, but each of them may have strengths and weaknesses, could be one more adapting than other, also in the specificities of industry specialization. So from this point of view, this idea, I would say, of cherry picking could be a solution that could lead to positive effect, for instance, in terms of industry competitiveness, in terms of productivity, and the like. There is an important implication also on jobs, on impacts on the development of new competencies. From what has been presented in the special issue, we now say that there is a negative impact on the adoption of the technology in absolute term, but we have to consider also the upgrading opportunity that could occur at the industry, but also at the regional level, and not necessarily there is always a substitution effect with technology, for instance, automation and work. It could depend also on the level of specialization, for instance, in different regions and for different areas. And I will conclude, and then I will leave today. And what next questions? What we observe is also that Industry 4.0 technologies that are developed with having in mind manufacturing, have instead a very important implication also on the evolution of business model, the evolution of how firm and regions industry may compete also at the global level, modifying, having an impact and improving also innovation dynamics. So from this point of view, also the process of implementation of this kind of technologies could lead to new knowledge, new patent, for instance, new way of applying technologies, which for some sense may be considered enabling technologies that could be adapted also in terms of small firms in very different ways. So to go to the last one, to stick in the time that I have, what's next? We see that there are some further questions. We are all researchers. We know that as soon as we have finished our research, new question arises. So one is related, and which is very actual, which is the implication in terms of the adoption of these technologies in the reconfiguration of value chain, taking into account the role of manufacturing per se. We know that those technologies deeply affect the way manufacturing is organized, also at the geographical level, and so further attention should be posed on how those technologies may impact our internationalization and on the way through which global value chain are structured, which put additional attention on the attractiveness of regions, and also we consider the role of policy. The other is the idea that there is an opportunity to further research, the fact that on the one hand, we have new knowledge that will be captured in terms of recent patenting innovation, patenting processes, in innovation, taking into account, how new technologies are emerging and are applied, but also we are should additional focus should be posed on the application of those kind of technologies, also taking into account the future of work. Last but not least, the relation between the ecological and the digital transition. So to what extent those kind of technologies which has been developed, taking into account productivity, efficiency, we are discovering that instead have a lot to do also with sustainability, environmental and social sustainability, considering this shift in the paradigm between the linear and the circular economy, but also another attention which is particularly also relevant also at the European Union level, with the human center kind of economy. So from industry 4.0 to what Japanese call society 5.0. So the idea that more and more those technologies are impacting on the way we are living, the way through which the work is organized, and the potential, we hope, benefit implication also in terms of environmental, social sustainability. So I will stop here. I hope, Roberto, on time, and thank you for any further question that could arise.
Okay, Eleonora, thank you very much for this interesting overview about the contents of the special issue. Of course, again, if you're curious, the link to the journal website has been posted here in the chat, so please take a look. It's now turn to leave the floor to Roberta Capello. Maybe she will appear. Okay, she's here. Roberta Capello, original. Okay. We cannot hear you, Roberta. No, we can't hear you. I think she will appear under the name of Silvia Cerisola, maybe. No, now we hear something.
Not really, but I can go and check.
Okay.
Just let me check.
Yes, Roberta is from Politecnico University of Milan, but I think all of us know her very well. Let's wait just a minute to see whether she can. Otherwise, if she has troubles, perhaps we can move the Sandro Montresor's presentation now and Roberta afterwards. So let's wait a second.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, sorry. It seems
No worries.
that in my office I could hear perfectly, but it seems that I cannot speak. Well,
someone is
okay,
boycotting
today
you.
it's not the right day for for speaking with the network we have. So let me say that I'm particularly pleased for this invitation. I thank the organizers, and I am pleased for different reasons. First of all, as president of the Italian section of Regional Science Association International, I'm extremely pleased to see that our flagship journal is increasing and is alive, and more than alive. It's dynamic. It puts on the table a lot of interesting issues, and now it opens, well, you can read them. I always get the new issues, and they are extremely important and interesting. But now this new form of entertainment and of possible discussion is even more interesting, because here we can really say ourselves, we can discuss what we have found and the issues, especially the issues that remain to be discussed. In this vein, then I move to the second reason why I'm extremely pleased. And it's because this theme is of very high importance. Well, we have understood from Eleonora that we still have a lot to work on. But I would like to summarize some reasons for the importance of this theme, and these are twofold. First of all, these technologies, 4.0 technologies, are really disruptive ones. They affect our lives, our way of working, our entertainment, the way in which entertain ourselves, and the way in which we can do business. So it affects all types of ways in which we live and we express ourselves. So these transformations have to be carefully analyzed, because they will really reshuffle and reorganize, restructure our economies, the way in which the value is created, and our society. And that's the first point. The second point, and this is even much more disruptive than what happened in the last technological paradigms. The second point is that the territorial dimension of all these effects is largely neglected in the literature still. So we have, according to me, they are treated in a very fragmented way still. Some case studies here, some case studies there, some elements, but we really miss the complexity of the whole story. Which means that we don't know how to reply to very simple questions like, what do we mean by these technological transformations? Okay, we speak about Industry 4.0 in this, but this is not the only transformation that takes place. We have the digital service economy going on. And this is again something that is intertwined with the Industry 4.0. Where do these technological transformation take place the most? Which regions or areas are affected the most by these transformations? And which are the implications, the socioeconomic implications of these transformations? Of course, some has already been said by Eleonora in a very elegant way, but we still have to do a lot of work on this. And I would like to say that because I hope that there are young people, young researchers with us that get interested in this field. I could speak for hours, and I have only 10 minutes. 5 of them have already been used. So I would like to go to an important question that we have together with also the work I've done with Camilla Lenzi. We have, let's say, taken into consideration. How are growth opportunities distributed or given, provided by these technologies, distributed in space? Of course, these technologies don't only create positive effects. We have a lot of negative aspects that have to be taken into consideration. The problems on the labor market, the increase in a lot of inequalities, interpersonal income inequalities, regional inequalities, and so on and so forth. But let's stick to the to the positive ones today. How are growth opportunities distributed in space? And here we have, as Eleonora said, some interesting, already some counterintuitive results, because we were expecting to have the core areas to get the highest advantages from all this. And instead, by looking at what is happening, both at the level of the invention, so where are these new technologies being invented, and also on the point of view of the adoption, where are these technologies adapted, you can see that some possibilities, and more than one possibility, exists for peripheral areas. Silvia, where is my? I would like to share the slides, just 2 slides to show you. These are. Sorry, I'm not on my computer. I'm stupid when I'm in my computer. I cannot. Condividi. So what we did was to. Here we are. Can you see it? Can you see the slide?
Yes, Roberto, yeah.
So that's the invention side. And we tried to, and we did, a taxonomy of European regions, showing where already a lot of knowledge of the 3.0 technologies was present. And you know that the 4.0 technologies are an elaboration of the 3.0 technology. So we were expecting those regions so the incumbent regions to remain incumbent. And that's it. These are the green areas. We have a lot of incumbents that are there, and they remain there. But unexpectedly, we found out that there are some regions, and especially that's important for us, our third Italy, Toscana, Emilia-Romagna, and Veneto, that register the capacity to be on top of the 4.0 technologies without having sufficient knowledge in 3.0 technology. So there is a leapfrogging process that is extremely interesting. And we found out which are the conditions, the local conditions that allow a region to, let's say, invent in a field where there is no knowledge before. And this is because of the capacity of, the nature of these technologies that are more or less also very, there is the capacity to use them instead of, so there is this possibility. The second one is on the adoption side. We did a lot of work trying to understand whether different technologies, and this chart tells you something about the robot adoption, so adoption of digital robots, advanced robots, on GDP growth. And we were asking ourselves whether these kind of technologies was of advantage only for regions specialized in advanced sectors, or in sectors where, like the automotive, where these robots could find let's say an easy adoption, a natural adoption. The dotted line instead here represents the marginal effects of robot adoption on GDP growth in regions where there is a specialization in traditional industrial sectors. So sectors like textile, that have not really the necessity to move at the first glance to move to the adoption of robots. And interestingly enough, you see that the marginal effects are higher they start when the adoption is low. These manufacturing, traditional manufacturing regions get a lower advantage. But by moving on with the adoption, they even get a higher marginal effect with respect to GDP growth than the other regions. So again, these are just 2 examples to show that even, let's say, less advanced regions get an opportunity in this period. And this is linked to what Eleonora said at the end. These technological paradigm is an opportunity and has to be grasped, keeping let's say the negative aspects under control. And this is, I think, let's say the moral duty also of us as regional scientists to look at this and to understand how we can make the best out of these technologies. Thank you very much. Hope I'm in time. Thank you.
Yes, perfectly. Thank you, Roberta. Thank you very much for a very interesting speech. I'm pretty sure that there will be the opportunity later on to discuss again about these issues and topics. So now let's move to the third presentation, so to Sandro.
Yes. Good afternoon, everybody. Let me try to share my screen and see whether you're still capable to say something. Can you see something there?
Yes, we can. Please, Sandro.
Right. Okay. So thank you very much. I'm definitely the least connected to the journal. I feel myself really the guest, and I'm really proud and honored to be here. And I really thank the organizer, Laura, Roberta, Roberto, for this interesting talk. Although I have had the opportunity to contribute to the special issue at stake with an interesting article co-authored with Chiara Burlina, who is also here among the attendees. Okay, so just few thoughts about the title that Roberto or the organizer have decided to give to this final, say, roundtable, charting the way forward Industry 4.0 research. To start with, this sort of subtitle alludes to the fact that we know already quite a lot about the Industry 4.0 phenomenon. Well, in my view, this is a phenomenon, and I've decided to use phenomenon on purpose, about which we know something, but in my view, not that much, okay? To start with, we all here are used to call it or associate it to the factory of the future. Some of us have already heard this in previous talk, call it the revolution, but whether this is actually a true revolution, a true industrial revolution like the previous one, is still something that is just subject to debate. There are a number of articles in the field of history of economics that actually doubt that it's actually an industrial revolution. This is a change, it's a paradigmatic change, but whether this could be relatable to and comparable in size and scope to previous revolution is still subject to debate. And to this fact, to debating the actual extent, nature, and scope of a revolution, there's a special issue in industry innovation coming out, guessed by myself and other people who could be of interest. Now, just to give you a little evidence about what makes doubt about these things, let me show you what emerged from a recent study I've done with Antonio Vezzani, looking at a very large sample of Italian firms on the Italian territory. So it's really a large number of firms, more than 200,000 firms, from which what you see that for the majority of the firms at stake, Industry 4.0 is mainly a question of having fast internet-based technologies. While the share of firms that have declared, this is I forgot to mention the last industrial survey of Italy, okay? So the share of firms that declare to have invested in the most enabling technologies, artificial intelligence and other technological areas is definitely lower than the internet-based ones. And the picture becomes even more telling if you further disaggregate the technologies of the Industry 4.0 revolution. You might notice here, again, that for the majority of the firms, the question is that of having a fast internet connection or using technology to secure the simulation. But when it comes to the most enabling technologies of Industry 4.0, the share of firms that have declared to have invested in this is really still quite thin and quite little, okay? So this is the first point that I think we should investigate somehow more in detail. And the same apply to the digital technologies to which the Industry 4.0 paradigm is associated, okay? We all call it enabling technologies. A lot of scholars, sometimes myself, also call it general purpose technologies, but here we should all down also too, because it's not really sure that all of these technologies are general purpose technologies the way we should call it, following seminar articles in the literature. There's an interesting recent paper by Arianna Martinelli et al. On industrial corporate change, with using pattern-based data and constructing a number of pattern-based indicators, generality, originality, and so forth, shows that among all the technologies that I showed you before, only few, in particular artificial intelligence and big data, are really general purpose. Okay, so this is another thing that we should consider very carefully. And then there's the story of the socioeconomic effects that the Industry 4.0 paradigm is entailing. Okay, Roberta has mentioned a number of these transformations, which are really important. The digitalization of jobs, routinization of jobs, servitization, digital value change, and so forth. And among these phenomena, there's one which is also on the table these days, which is the fact that the Industry 4.0 could actually spur a new turn in environmental sustainability. This is a point that Eleonora in his introductory talk has already touched, okay? And here we got the point of a twin transition, on which I will dedicate the remaining part of my presentation, the story of opportunity of combining the digital transformation with the green transition. A story which has become really pivotal in Europe, starting from the new industrial strategy that we have, and even more so in the national plans for recovery and resilience. Okay, digital and green together. And here I would like to share with you some points that to me represent challenges that we ourselves as researchers we should actually deal with in order to investigate this important thing of a twin transition. And the majority of these challenges are actually, as usual, data challenges. So the first point to consider, and I think we should do, I'm trying to do this myself, to recognize that the twin transition is also a twofold transition, which is made up of two parts. On the one hand, we should have actually digital technologies functional to the green transition. So artificial intelligence, which serves smart grids, for example. But we should also consider that we need green digital technologies. That is, digital technologies that have a lower, more beneficial environmental impact, because the majority of them use very rare raw materials, are very much intensive of water and energy use. They create very dangerous waste. So there's also the need of looking at the green digital and not only the digital green. And there's very little research which try to look at the two sides of this of the twin transition, because looking at these two sides require multi-layer data that we hardly have, or we have in a very little amount, to be sure. The second challenge is that Roberta has already clarified this. We need to distinguish what is digital that we consider and what is the green that we consider. Okay, because as Roberta has said, when you think about digitalization, we need to distinguish digital adoption from digital investments and innovation, which is not always that easy. But when you do it, you actually recognize that there are interesting differences between the two sides of the phenomenon. And the same applies to the green side part of the story. Okay, here also we should distinguish green technology innovation, with respect to which we can use a lot of pattern data, and there's been a lot of literature on that. But we also have green non-tech innovation. We have green production and consumption modes to consider, about which instead we do not have so many data. And to conclude, the most important part of my talk with respect to the audience that is here today, the twin transition, as much as like the digital and the green transition, arguably have a geography which is not yet known. And here, if you allow me, there's an open call for a special issue on regional studies, edited by myself, Alessandra Faggiano, Alberto Marzucchi, where we would like to actually attract contribution of this. So on how the twin transition distributed across regions, okay? Here also, there's a challenge in terms of data because we need georeferenced data to address the embeddedness of the twinning. So not only of the digital and the green transition separately, but also on the capacity of making the digital at the service of the green transition, okay? And as an important aside, this geography should illuminate us about how the twin transition can be, as it should be, a territorial just transition. That is a transition that helps basically reinforcing cohesion and convergence rather than the other way around, okay? I don't know how I'm doing in terms of time, Roberto. Just tell me if I have 1 minute.
1 minute. 1 minute.
If I have 1 minute more to show you some interesting results of some research I'm doing of a topic, okay? Talking about the geography of green transition, here what you have here is a map of a distribution of green tech specialization, okay? Comes from a recent article of mine. And there's no time, just having intuitions. If you look at this map and you compare it with this other, where you have the distribution of artificial intelligence knowledge stock, you immediately recognize that the two maps are pretty different. And so the twinning the two transition could be actually not as trivial or as immediate as it could appear. And to conclude, just the last slide, coming from another work I'm doing on the twin transition, using firm data in a survey where firms are asked to declare the areas in which they are based, okay? So here you have a set of digital technologies disaggregated by the areas in which firms actually are located. As you immediately see, for some of these technologies, there are actually more adoption of digital technologies in urban rather than in rural areas. But for other digital technologies, the more key enabling, like robots or like artificial intelligence, you see that there's no so much differences across the areas. And the last really slide comes from the same study about eco-innovation. Notice here that quite somehow unexpectedly, the share of firms that have declared to eco-innovate, the same sample of firms that I mentioned before, the share is larger in rural areas rather than in urban areas, okay? And this is an interesting thing that I think deserves a lot of attention in future because it connects to what Roberta has said before, that the digital transformation, along with the green transition, could provide an important opportunity, not only for lagging regions, but also for rural areas to catch up and actually compare to urban areas in the advancement of this transition and of the true transition. And I think I conclude here and I leave the space to the debate. Thank you very much.
Well, thanks a lot, Sandro. Very interesting insights indeed. So thanks to all our speakers again, and thanks again also to all our attendees here. So now it's time, we have more or less 20 minutes to leave to the Q&A section. So I kindly invite all of you who want to ask something or to comment on what we have seen so far to raise your hand and to pose the question. I have one, but I would like presenting. Yes, you are.
Okay.
Okay.
Sorry.
Now we are. In doing so, I also kindly ask you to introduce yourself, so your name and perhaps your affiliation, if possible. So while we wait, sorry, perhaps I have a couple of consideration that first of all, what we get at the end of all this presentation is that there is food for special issues, definitely. So not only for our journal, let's say, but for others. So I think that we are pretty safe on this side. There are many aspects that must be investigated, definitely. There are 2 or 3 things that come to my mind, for example, and I would like to leave, but whoever wants to reply to me is more than welcome. Well, the first concerns, what I found very interesting is, for example, this idea that it's still, I think this is not a new story, but I live perhaps on what Sandro have said, and also Eleonora, for example, that firms are not still perfectly, or I wonder whether firms, especially small and medium enterprises, are still really aware of the potential of these I 4.0 technologies. So the slides presented by Sandro, well, would imply maybe not properly or not really. And so perhaps the fact that still is not a true revolution, perhaps it's also partly explainable, but this idea that firms are not fully aware of the potential. So they are misusing them, or really using only at low potential, so to say. The other is about, well, another thing that, but I leave this question on here. Well, it concerns industrial districts. So the last thing that Sandro has emphasized, that the urban-rural divide is not so, let's say, clear in some of the adoption of some of these technologies, makes me suspect perhaps that there is perhaps industrial districts, and here we come to Italy in particular, right, that are not definitely a urban phenomenon, but not properly rural, perhaps, something in the middle. Perhaps this twin transition can involve them even more than cities, I don't know, or I don't know. I leave this question for you. And the final one that I have to say that really comes into my mind, and it's really interesting, because I had a different idea before listening to Roberta also, for example, is the following. So I was really suspecting that, especially if we remember that a few weeks ago, the European Union started this CHIPS Act story, right? So the idea of self-producing, or to rise the sovereignty in semiconductor production, makes me suspect that, since we are talking about complex activities, that not all the regions, not all the cities are equally equipped to embark in this kind of production, but even absorption, perhaps, capabilities, skills, infrastructures, factories, whatever. So my idea was that perhaps this CHIPS Act and all this digital world would increase spatial inequality. It's really an issue. But what Sandro and Roberta has just shown me, that perhaps that would not be the case, because maybe also peripheral areas do have some chances to catch up, or not to be so lagging behind as I was suspecting. So what is your opinion on that? So I leave these questions for you. And I repeat, if you have other questions, please raise your hands. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Roberto. May I start? Then I
will
leave the
women first.
Okay, I will keep the first one. You ask about SMEs and Industry 4.0. I know that there is a topic that I've been, making research for a while, also with Marco and Mauro. So I will ask also them to join the discussion if they want. What we observe, not only what we publish in this special issue, but more in general, that and it's also, I agree with what Sandro is saying, is that actually there's been a discussion on the different ways of revolution. So there has been a new economy, the ICT first, what Sandro called internet-based technology, and then there is this new one we are talking today, but instead they are very much interconnected. And what we observe, for instance, is that especially SMEs, there is a process of path dependence. So you learn about how to adopt and to use digital technologies. So you start with complex technologies like ERP, for instance, which are not included in the Industry 4.0 umbrella, but could be particularly relevant in improving, transforming, also from a managerial point of view, also small firms. And then starting from that, they upgrade to another level. So I think that there is a process of a continuous improvement, let's say, when especially SMEs may have a learning process. I also will say that is not necessarily only a problem of size. Of course, as small firms have problems with resource constraint, financial limitation, but we observe also that there are a lot of small and mid-sized firms that are really, really innovative in the adoption of technologies. And so from this point of view, there are different group of firms, the one larger but also small firms that are very aware, to reply to your answer, about the potentialities, and others that instead they think that it's not something for their business. They don't really understand what are the potential in terms of application. Also a keyword that also Roberta was using before, talking in terms of regions. There is also another element which referred to the fact that also in connection with the statistics that Sandro was showing us, that usually there are low penetration, some technologies. What we say is that on average, the number of technologies that are adopted is not very high. So, but in absolute terms, so they are not collecting artificial intelligence, IoT, robotics and the like, but they choose the one that fits more with the product processes. So this is another issue that I think we have to consider. So the idea that there are technologies that are more adaptive, and this is to the specificities of the firms in terms of industry, and so from this point of view, I think that the variety of situation is much broader than what we observe or we should expect. But I will stop here because I mean I want to also leave my colleagues to reply.
Thank you, Eleonora. Roberta, please feel free.
Well, I just add a few ideas. Well, I totally agree with what was said by my colleagues. The development of these technologies is still very limited. We really speak a lot, but then if we look into the data, we see that both the industrial side of the story and the digital service economies are still to come. But this means that the disruptive effects still have to come. And this is what we should be aware of and start immediately now to be prepared, even with the local labor markets, to, let's say, readjust the specializations of young people towards the fact that they will have to deal with these advanced technologies. Going to the idea of industrial districts versus other areas, I think that this is the reply to you, Roberto, is that it depends very much on the technology we are dealing with and we are speaking about. This technological paradigm is made of very, very different technologies. They are, as Sandro said, we can call them even general purpose technologies, but when they are applied in different fields, they provoke different changes that again can be disruptive. Think about what happens with the digital markets. And I'm not speaking only about the fact that you can have a pizza bought via the website and brought at your home when you like, but the fact that you can buy a product and there are, let's say, digital intermediaries that have no resources or no, they are in a market without owning the resource. For example, Uber, the platform Uber doesn't own the car, and the car is, let's say, brought into by the employer. So without any resource, the platform, so the intermediaries, the digital intermediaries, get an extremely high profit share because it makes it intermediates it makes the connection between the supply and the demand, and this is so the market becomes a three-side market. So there are three major actors, and the value created in a network is generally mostly attributed to the intermediaries, which is something that has never occurred before. And this is something that radically changes even the competition that you can have among people, among firms, local firms. So the reply is it depends on which technologies we are speaking about. And I leave there the floor to Sandro, otherwise we speak too much.
Right. So just a couple of thoughts on the points that you raised, Roberto. I'm in general aligned with what Eleonora and Roberta said about the state of development or penetration of the Industry 4.0 paradigm. What Roberta said is pretty true. I mean, we have a still little rate of penetration of Industry 4.0, although this depends very much on the kind of indicators that you look at. Because that picture that I showed before, I should have underlined more, refer to investments of firms in digital technology. So those firms have been asked, did you invest? So, you know, resources in the development of these technologies. So maybe that if asked about the adoption of technologies developed by someone else outside the firm's, number could have been different. Okay, still, in terms of investments and even less in terms of inventions, the rate of advancement is not that much. Still, as Roberta said, we have already an impact. So if you look at the economic impact of these technologies that are still rare in distribution, there's already a significant impact. In terms of twin transition, for example, which is the part of the story that interests me more, with those data that I show you, so with those little investments in digital technologies, you still have a significant correlation with the eco-innovation activities of those firms, okay? So even if with such a, say, not so much diffuse yet involvement in the 2.0, you still have some significant effect. And as Roberta said, when the Industry 4.0 will proceed and actually become more mature in diffusion, we might have even more effects than those, okay? And this is the first point. Second point about the relevance of industrial districts or more large urban areas or agglomeration economies. Here, and a point I would like to raise, still related to the twin transition, is that there is sort of a symmetry about the role of agglomeration economies for the two transition. So on the one side, if you think digital technologies, it apparently agglomeration or being closer proximity is not that much an issue. I mean, if you think, well, digital technology should allow firms to locate wherever they are, okay, although we all know that the world is not flat, of course, okay? But you know, digital technology should attenuate the relevance of the proximity. And it actually does that to a certain extent. But when you look the green side of the story, and in particular, when you focus on the circular economy paradigm, which is the most recent part of the green transition story, well, there, proximity, agglomeration is still of a certain importance, okay? Because the circular economy is also above all about, you know, exchanging material flows, not so much knowledge flows. And when you have to exchange material flows, like an industrial symbiosis, proximity is quite important. So you have two sides in which agglomeration economies have different roles. And when you try to combine the two, well, that could be an issue. Or an issue, of course, which both firms and policymakers should care very, very carefully. And I'm done.
Okay, thank you very much, Sandro. Thank you very much, Roberta and Eleonora. There is some time left, so I kindly invite those of you who are interested in posing a question or a comment.
Roberto, there is
Rossella,
Luciana.
please. Great. Rossella, you can speak.
Can you hear me?
Yes, please. The floor is yours.
Thanks. So thank you to everybody for this modality to present special issues. It's very interesting. We have to replicate this kind of opportunity. So I have a very small question for Roberta and for Sandro. That is a curiosity. Have you investigated the reason why of twin transition? The point are two, I think. An industrial reason or a financial reason or others? Thanks.
Please, Roberta, if you want to start.
Well, I am not really an expert in twin transitions because I've looked mostly on the digital side of the story. So I leave Sandro to reply to that. In my my reply to you would just be that they are both the industrial and the especially in this period of time. The fact that we have to move into a green transition is much more strong than before.
Can I?
Please.
Yeah, I agree with Roberta. I think the two sides are equally important. The question, if I had looked at these things, the reasons in my research, answer is not yet, because it's actually difficult to have those kind of primary data that you need to understand the relevance of financial reasons of financial availability versus other things. Okay, to the best of my knowledge, the survey that's covering the diffusion of a digital transformation and the green transition are not so much concerned about the motivation. So you get a lot about the motivations in the community innovation surveys database, right? Why did you adopt or you don't adopt a certain innovation, but not so much yet about the twinning of the two. I do think that a financial motivation should be there, okay? Because of course you need to have resources not only to actually keep your firm with digital technologies, but you need to have also resources for make these digital technologies at the service of a green transition, okay? So using artificial intelligence for a green application for sure is a delicate task, which is maybe not that trivial as just using artificial intelligence for, I don't know, making the production process more efficient or the marketing process, okay? So harnessing the digital technologies for the green transition is, in my view, more complicated, more complex than in other use. And this should for sure entails the need of specific financial resources. But on the other end, also the industrial side also has a role. So the industries in which firms operate also provide heterogeneous opportunities about the extent to which the digital technologies can be made functional to the green one, okay? There are actually industries where these opportunities could be quite abundant and exploitable, some other instead where they are not, okay? You get some industry where digital technologies are, you get the use of those digital technologies which are unfortunately very, very dirty. And in those sectors where digital technologies are dirty, of course, there's little scope for making them green. But this is still an industry-specific factor, which, coming to your question, tells to me that the two sides that you mentioned are equally relevant.
Thanks a lot. I don't know, Rossella, whether you had something else in mind, maybe public incentives also.
Yes, it's true. I'm thinking about that. I'm thinking about the political side. This is another point. It depends about the budget, you know. So what is important, I think, that the story of 4.0 may be much more an industrial side. But when you compose both of them, maybe the balance is changing. So I think that will be interesting to try to see the reason why, because by one side is just a political or financial reason, by the other side is really a problem of the industry. So it depends about which kind of innovation you take in account, the sector and so on and so on. But now you can see that most of the firms doesn't invest thinking about strategy, industrial strategy and so on, but just thinking about to get money to find funds. And so the new business, the new opportunity, the green one. So what we have to check, I think, and see really if this is a twin transition in the sense of twin, digital twin, you know, by one side, or just a financial opportunity, I think. But we have to start that and to check. Thank you.
Yes, yeah, thank you very much. That's an interesting point, definitely. Okay, I think that we are almost done. I don't know whether, Marco, you raise your hands, please.
Yeah,
Well, I want just to add something. It's more than a comment. Maybe there's also different angles that we have to take about twin transition. The fact that you mix up 4.0 technologies and environmental sustainability. There's still the fact that because we are using more and more digital technologies, we should also analyze the sustainability of those technologies. The fact that 4.0 technologies requires a totally different infrastructure, and by infrastructure I mean all data centers and cloud services that let the industry 4.0 possible. Besides, of course, broadband, the fact that Sandro found that the companies are asking for broadband is relevant by the fact that in order to get advantage of Industry 4.0, you need broadband. And in the past, you see that a lot of companies didn't ask for broadband, so that's challenging. So we need a totally different infrastructure. And that infrastructure, I mean, data centers that are growing like mushrooms all over the places, they still have an impact in terms of sustainability and local sustainability. So I think that we should take also this into account because we think that always digital is good and green. Well, maybe we should take into account the fact that even the digital, although is less relevant than the analogic equivalent, but has still an impact. So we need also to take into account this element because digital is going to increase over time. That's a point. So I think also these hidden infrastructures that we don't see, it's relevant, and it's even local, it's regional. So because data centers are local, are physical things, are not immaterial ones. So that could be an issue in the near future, as well as the fact that that's my really point of view on Industry 4.0, we have to keep an eye on Industry 4.0 for the next 15 years. Because usually when, when we take into account this phenomenon, we as researchers, as communities, we focus in the very beginning and then we lose interest and we focus on another topic. But I think that this is, I agree with Roberta, this is a revolution, but it's a long revolution. It's not something that will happen in a couple of years. It will require a lot of time. I remember that the first internet message was in 1969. So it was a long journey to arrive today with this web conference. So I think that we have to keep to analyze, because we will see a lot of changes in the near future. We don't know, and nobody knows what's going on. So we have to keep an eye on it. Definitely.
Thanks a lot, Marco. I think that our digital time has finished.
Okay.
I have to really thank everybody. But I think I can leave the floor to Laura for a final cheer from the editorial board. So from my perspective, it has been a pleasure to be the first chairman of the first webinar. So good luck for the following ones, of course, and to all my colleagues here. So thanks again. And Laura, please, the floor is yours for the end.
Thank you, Roberto. I would like, of course, to thank our panelists. Thank you for having accepted our invitation. And I would like also to thank the guest editor of this interesting special issue, and Il Mulino, of course, for their cooperation. I would like also to inform you that this is not a one-shot event. We have already scheduled a new webinar to present another special issue. Okay, I would like just to show you the new event. If you are interested, It is scheduled on May 13, and it will focus on the importance of the regional dimension of economic modeling studies for policy impact and for policy impact assessment in Europe. And if you are interested, you are all invited to this new event. Thank you very much for having been here for us, and I hope to see you again in our next webinar. Thank you all, and have a nice afternoon.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 Bye. Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Ciao.
Ciao a tutti, grazie.
Ciao.